but when I think of God, and I think there's a lot of people that think this way, I think of this concept of whatever it is that sparked this thing that created the universe that landed us here today, right? And that can be anything, right? When I say God, it could be the traditional, I grew up Catholic, the Catholic view of that, where there is some being, for some reason it's determined to be a man in the sky who deliberately, intentionally designed this and created it the way it was. Or it could go all the way the other way to just somebody says, well, it's just random. This is all just random. It was a random sequence of events that led to the Big Bang. You know, if that's actually what kicked it off, that led to us being here today, then I would say, well, then it's the God of randomness, right? Let's look at it like that, right? If tomorrow, God forbid, no pun intended, I find out I have cancer, or I get hit by a bus, or I hit the lottery, somebody would say, well, that's all just random. Okay, but there's still some God of randomness. Something led that to happen. So there is something that's driving this whole thing in whatever form you're most comfortable with. And I have views on that, right? I've written about it. I've talked about it on what God I think, and logic plays a big role in it for me. I find myself trying to be a humble servant, if you will, of the God of logic, of just there's a cause and an effect for things. There's an explanation as to why something happened, even if it's not intentional or deliberate or designed by somebody, but some sequence of events did lead to it. And I carry that through to how I formulate my beliefs and take my actions, of trying to be rooted in some explanation that I could at least to some degree understand and explain. And the more I think about this, I came up with this thought, this phrase really, as I was writing about it, that maybe we get the God we choose, which is kind of a funny phrase. But what I mean by that is it kind of makes me think of the old cliched saying, if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. So whatever you think, that's what it's going to be. That's the result you're going to get. If you don't think you can do it, then you're not going to do it. If you think you can do it, then you'll find a way to do it. And it's that same kind of principle with you get the God you choose. If you choose to want a God or believe in a God who is vengeful, who is very authoritarian to some degrees, right? Very clear, strict rules on what life should be, and certain people adhere, and those that don't are either banished to an eternity in hell, or they're just evil, or they should be punished, or whatever it might be, then that's the God you're going to get. That's the world you're going to live in. That's the framework in which your world will function, and the way you see the world, the way you interact with it, and frankly, the way the world interacts back with you is going to be as if that God is the God that exists universally. If you choose to follow or worship a God that is much more loving and compassionate and forgiving and cares about the goodness in the world and the joy and acceptance, very likely that's the God you're going to get, and that's the universe and the world that you're going to find yourself in. If, like me, you choose a God who thinks logic is key to everything, and that the most important thing is to have an understanding and to try to gain clarity on what led to this point or this situation or this belief, well, then that's the God you will get. The world you live in, the world you function in, will be one that is very logical. And this idea that we get the God that we choose, I think, is a really interesting one with interesting implications for people as you think about it. And some may even say it's blasphemous, right? If you are somebody who views that more traditional view of God, right? Maybe Judeo-Christian or Muslim or whatever it might be, it could really be anything. There could be something blasphemous in that, which I don't have any authority or choice or decision-making of the world I live in or the implications or the God. The God is just the God. I find myself believing more and more that that's not the case, that whatever that God you think exists, well, then that's the God that exists for you. And at the very root of it all, I probably think it all comes back to one thing, right? Whatever sparked and kicked the whole thing off, whether it be randomness or what have you. But if you can bring yourself to accept that idea, it does give you some agency, some more sense of, I don't want to say control per se, but some degree of control. To say, if I don't want to be hateful, if I don't want to be rigid and structured in how I function, or maybe you go a different way, I don't want to be as open and free, I want more control in my life, well, then you pick, right? Because ultimately all God really means in the context in which we're talking about it right now is what controls you, what dictates the life you live. And maybe control is the wrong word. What guides you? What is the framework you use to move through this world and make decisions about how we should act? And for much of human history, or at least the more recent human history, Many of us have chosen to subscribe to certain beliefs and religious faith that give us that and say, this is the world you should live in. And it's led to what it's led to, lots of different consequences and implications of that. And I think just accepting or at least entertaining the idea that we have a little bit more freedom and choice in that. We can choose the God we want, and we will get that God. That will be the thing that then dictates our life. The framework we use to make those decisions, judge the world, assess the world, and ultimately move through the world. And I get some comfort in that. There's something deeply comforting in that, to feel like I get to play a little bit of a part in how the world functions, at least for me and from my perspective. To be able to take my experiences, the inputs, the wisdom that's out there, and use that to say, this is the world I want to live in. This is the God that I want over that world. It makes God much more of a concept than it is a literal entity or being, which I probably think it is anyway. And if we can really buy into that concept and be thoughtful about the concept that is most important to us and means the most to us, I think our life could be that much more fulfilling and enriching as a result of it.